What's up, cool people? I'm Matt Conroy. Welcome back to some more Bible reading, aka the Scripture Scoop, formerly known as Wednesdays in the Word, aka me just reading through the Bible and adding my thoughts as we go. That's literally every conceivable way of referring to this that I have thought of, ever. Anyway, last chapter was mostly a bunch of genealogy stuff, getting into Esau's descendants. Esau, of course, being brother of Jacob, son of Isaac, son of Abraham. Anyway. Basically did that because Esau moved elsewhere, away from Canaan, or at least away from where Jacob was in Canaan. And yeah, but we're gonna keep focusing on Jacob and his family for a while, it seems. And that's kind of what we're dealing with here in chapter 37. So, here we go. Verse 1. So Jacob settled again in the land of Canaan, where his father had lived as a foreigner. This is the account of Jacob and his family. When Joseph was 17 years old, he often tended his father's flocks. He worked for his half-brothers, sons of his father's wives Bilhah and Zilpah. But Joseph reported to his father some of the bad things his brothers were doing. Okay. So, Joseph was obviously one of the younger sons, not the youngest. The youngest was Benjamin. But Joseph, I think, was the next youngest. But anyway, so I guess Joseph was not exactly treated very well by his brothers, or at least his half-brothers. But there may or may not be a reason for that. We'll get into that if it gets brought up here. Alright, verse 3. Jacob loved Joseph more than any of his other children, because Joseph had been born to him in his old age. So one day Jacob had a special gift made for Joseph, a beautiful robe. But his brothers hated Joseph because their father loved him more than the rest of them. They couldn't say a kind word to him. Okay, so that seems to kind of explain why his brothers didn't really like him so much. Because he was Daddy's favorite. And nobody likes not being the favorite. Okay, real quick. Asterisks, let's see here. Okay, first asterisk was just possibly having Israel instead of Jacob. But some translations, I guess, will use one more than the other. Like, this one, it seems, may use Jacob more when referring to the person instead of Israel, even though he was renamed Israel by God. But, you know, that's to help, I guess, alleviate any confusion when talking about the place, Israel, as it would eventually come to be known. Anyway, second asterisk. Traditionally rendered as a coat of many colors. So, rather than saying a beautiful robe. And, I mean, the exact meaning of the Hebrew is uncertain, so it could somewhat realistically have either meaning. I think at the very least you can imply that it was a very special, nice-looking outer garment. But I think the coat of many colors translation is the one many people are more familiar with. Verse 5. One night Joseph had a dream, and when he told his brothers about it, they hated him more than ever. Listen to this dream, he said. We were out in the field tying up bundles of grain. Suddenly my bundle stood up, and your bundles all gathered around and bowed low before mine. His brothers responded, So you think you will be our king, do you? Do you actually think you will reign over us? And they hated him all the more because of his dreams and the way he talked about them. I'm noting it says, and the way he talked about them. Them being the dreams, or them being his brothers. I'm not 100% sure. Probably more so the dreams, given the structure of the sentence. But, that tells me he might not have been, very humble with how he told these dreams. But anyway, his brothers already didn't like him, so this really was probably just adding more fuel to the fire, so to speak. It's not like this was the one only and or the foremost reason why they didn't like him. But anyway, moving on to verse 9. Soon Joseph had another dream, and again he told his brothers about it. Listen, I have had another dream, he said. The sun, moon, and 11 stars bowed low before me. This time he told the dream to his father as well as to his brothers, but his father scolded him. What kind of dream is that? He asked. Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow to the ground before you? But while his brothers were jealous of Joseph, his father wondered what the dreams meant. See, Jacob being a younger brother who was given essentially more blessings and honor from God than his older brother, he may have been a little bit more sympathetic to the idea of a younger brother ruling over his older brothers. But still, he was a little questioning of the idea at the very least. Anyway, verse 12. Soon after this, Joseph's brothers went to pasture their father's flocks at Shechem. When they had been gone for some time, Jacob said to Joseph, Your brothers are pasturing the sheep at Shechem. Get ready, and I will send you to them. I'm ready to go, Joseph replied. Okay. That's pretty self-explanatory. Although, here's Shechem entering the picture again, at least the place. Which, again, map would be helpful to know how far apart things were. But in any case, I would assume if they're doing stuff like that there, like, it couldn't have been super far away. But, I don't know. Because Jacob had a lot of things. We don't know how far that spanned. So, if he had enough stuff for there not to be enough room for both he and Esau to live within Canaan, okay. Or maybe some of these places are just a lot smaller than I would tend to think that they are. I don't know. Anyway. Okay, moving on. So Joseph's ready to go. Verse 14. Go and see how your brothers and the flocks are getting along, Jacob said. Then come back and bring me a report. So Jacob sent him on his way, and Joseph traveled to Shechem from their home in the valley of Hebron. When he arrived there, a man from the area noticed him wandering around the countryside. What are you looking for? He asked. Okay. So it says in the valley of Hebron, which, again, if I had a map, would make it a little bit more helpful. But, I even tried looking up some maps, and not all of them were super duper obviously helpful. Like, I didn't exactly see all the names of all the different places that I've seen mentioned here, all, like, you know, easily on one map, or even, like, a website with an obvious series of maps that could have, like, I really kind of miss some of the old Bibles I had. Although, I guess there's probably some in my big chunker study Bible that's of the ESV translation. But anyway, if you're really curious, you could probably find some maps for yourself, either online or in some copy of the Bible that you might be able to obtain. But anyway, okay, so Joseph goes out per Jacob's command to find his brothers, gets to the countryside, and a man from the area wants to know what he's looking for. Anyway, verse 16. I'm looking for my brothers, Joseph replied. Do you know where they are pasturing their sheep? Yes, the man told him. They have moved on from here, but I heard them say, let's go on to Dothan. So Joseph followed his brothers to Dothan and found them there. Okay, so if they're going this far now, it makes me wonder, like, maybe like where they were in the Valley of Hebron was kind of adjacent to Shechem, and then maybe Dothan would be just a little bit past that. I don't know. But anyway, so the brothers went elsewhere, and Joseph tracked him down to there because of this guy that saw him wandering around. Alrighty. So, verse 18. When Joseph's brothers saw him coming, they recognized him in the distance. As he approached, they made plans to kill him. Here comes the dreamer, they said. Come on, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns. We can tell our father a wild animal has eaten him. Then we'll see what becomes of his dreams. So, not exactly a friendly idea. I mean, again, it's already known his brothers kind of hated him, and also didn't like the ideas of his dreams as they were being presented, because they were basically like, well, why do you think you're going to rule over us, you little twerp? Is kind of the impression that I get. But since they're a little ways away from home, it'd be a bit easier to, sort of disguise what they're doing and, make up a story to cover themselves. Anyway, moving on, verse 21. But when Reuben heard of their scheme, he came to Joseph's rescue. Let's not kill him, he said. Why should we shed any blood? Let's just throw him into this empty cistern here in the wilderness. Then he'll die without our laying a hand on him. Reuben was secretly planning to rescue Joseph and return him to his father. See, so at least Reuben was not so hateful of Joseph that he was willing to straight up kill the boy. Or man, it's not really known his age at this point. It's implied that he's young for sure. Anyway. Oh, actually, it does say Joseph was 17. So, by our modern definition, sort of still a boy, but just barely. And probably wouldn't have been thought of as a boy as of that time. I don't know. But anyway, let's move on before I digress. The point is, Reuben still cares enough, and also is, you know, not wanting to do anything particularly wrong. Anyway, verse 23. So when Joseph arrived, his brothers ripped off the beautiful robe he was wearing. Then they grabbed him and threw him into the cistern. Now the cistern was empty. There was no water in it. Then, just as they were sitting down to eat, they looked up and saw a caravan of camels in the distance coming toward them. It was a group of Ishmaelite traders taking a load of gum, balm, and aromatic resin from Gilead down to Egypt. Alright. So, I'm not totally sure if I have this right, but, cisterns were generally meant as, water storage. Somewhat like a well, but a bit of a different design, I think. Anyway, but in this case, the cistern was empty, so, it's not like they were going to drown him by putting him in there. And let's see, it's obviously mentioning the traders coming by for a reason. Let's see why. Verse 26. Judah said to his brothers, "What will we gain by killing our brother? We'd have to cover up the crime. Instead of hurting him, let's sell him to those Ishmaelite traders. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood." And his brothers agreed. So when the Ishmaelites, who were Midianite traders, came by, Joseph's brothers pulled him out of the cistern and sold him to them for 20 pieces of silver. And the traders took him to Egypt. Let's see here. Asterisks. Verse 26 just says we'd have to cover his blood instead of cover up the crime. Next asterisk is 20 shekels, which, at least weight-wise, is, there's a reasonable approximation for it. What exactly the value of that would be is not so clear, but still. Anyway, that's it for those. So, now instead of killing him or even just leaving him to die, or, having Reuben's plan to go back and get him, the bulk of the brothers say, well, you know what? We're not going to kill him. That's just a big mess. So why don't we sell him off? We can at least get something out of that. So, yeah. That's the plan they're going with, I guess. Well, actually, that's not just the plan they're going with. They did it. They sold him for 20 pieces of silver, aka 20 shekels. Anyway, verse 29. Sometime later, Reuben returned to get Joseph out of the cistern. When he discovered that Joseph was missing, he tore his clothes in grief. Then he went back to his brothers and lamented, "The boy is gone. What will I do now?" Then the brothers killed a young goat and dipped Joseph's robe in its blood. They sent the beautiful robe to their father with this message: "Look at what we found. Doesn't this robe belong to your son?" So they still kind of wound up needing to do a bit of a cover-up anyway. But that really only seems to be because of Reuben. Reuben must have been elsewhere when the rest of them decided, hey, let's sell Joseph off to these traders. It's almost like Reuben kind of wanted to help take care of Joseph. I think Reuben was the oldest. So, he would be the one kind of most responsible by default for, keeping an eye on the other brothers. But anyway, so they still kind of had to cover it up. Only in this case, it's to make it look like Joseph died rather than them actually killing him and trying to cover it up. Anyway, so Bloody Rope gets sent back to Jacob, and verse 33. Their father recognized it immediately. "Yes," he said, "it is my son's robe. A wild animal must have eaten him. Joseph has clearly been torn to pieces." Then Jacob tore his clothes and dressed himself in burlap. He mourned deeply for his son for a long time. His family all tried to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. "I will go to my grave mourning for my son," he would say, and then he would weep. Meanwhile, the Midianite traders arrived in Egypt, where they sold Joseph to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. Potiphar was captain of the palace guard. Okay, and that's actually where the chapter ends. Couple of last little thoughts on the last chunk of verses. So their cover up seems to have worked. I mean, what reason would he have to doubt them unless they like gave themselves up? But it seems Jacob took it especially hard. Quote, he refused to be comforted. But anyway, saying, "I will go to my grave." What's the... okay, so the asterisk there refers to the Hebrew, "go down to Sheol." As far as I can recall, that is actually the first mention of Sheol. I don't recall talking about it at any previous time. So, this gives me a chance to talk a little bit about... Okay, so, Sheol was this concept, Old Testament concept, especially early Old Testament concept. Sheol was basically their idea of what any sort of afterlife would have been. It roughly translates to something like the pit. And basically, the idea is pretty much what it sounds like. It's just, when you die, you go to this, deep, dark pit that, is full of, it's weird to say full of emptiness, but it's, just dark, empty, barren. There's nothing there, and it's just like it's a permanent state of emptiness, loneliness, nothingness. At least that's kind of my understanding of the whole idea behind Sheol. In a way, save for the whole, stereotypical Satan idea and, fire and brimstone and all that kind of stuff. It's basically an early concept of hell without all the fluff that we've given it over the years. Just an eternal place of darkness and loneliness. And it was basically believed that was where you went when you died. That's my understanding, at least, of the concept of Sheol. Before I wrap this up, let me make sure I cover the other little side note, or footnote more accurately here. Verse 36. Just says Hebrew is the Midianites. The relationship between the Midianites and the Midianites is unclear. See also various other verses. Anyway. Okay, so, again, recap. So, Joseph is debatably a little bit of a brat, and he gets these dreams that he's going to rule over his brothers, or at least that his brothers will bow to him. And his brothers like him even less because of that. He was already Daddy's favorite, seems a little spoiled, and now he just adds all the more reason for them to dislike him. So, while they're a ways away from home, Jacob sends Joseph to go track them down. He finds them, and they decide to sell him off to get rid of him, since they dislike him that strongly. But they make it seem like he died as a way to sort of cover that up. And Jacob is inconsolable over this. But in the meantime, the people Joseph got traded to sold him off to the captain of the palace guard in Egypt. So, I mean, he's alive at least, but also he's in servitude in a foreign land. So, but anyway, so yeah, that wraps things up for this chapter. I think we will be continuing on with that particular storyline. If not in the next chapter, then very shortly after. So anyway, that's going to do it for now. As always, like, share, subscribe, click the bell, all that good stuff. Just look down in the description for any info you need on following me here or on my other social media pages or anything like that. And of course, leave comments down below with any thoughts that you have. Especially if you have more information regarding the concept of Sheol and what it was. And, like, because that kind of dominated, you know, early biblical thought regarding any sort of afterlife. It may have just been another way of saying, you know, I'm gonna die and be, you know, in the ground, but my understanding and what people have told me over the years gives me the impression it's a bit more than that. But anyway, if you know more, feel free to add comments, as well as any other thoughts that you have down there. So anyway, that's it. Hope you're all doing well. Hopefully I will see you for the next video. But until then, stay cool, people.